water cremation. I'm proud of it, not proud of what I've done, but I'm proud of what it offers to families. And that perceived value, if you will, is so very important because that's all you have is this perception, both on your grief journey, on your journey of planning for your family, final disposition. It's pretty varied and heavy, and it doesn't have to be so weighty, if you will. The process of taking care of someone in a final disposition. Grief is grief, and it's different for everybody.
Welcome to the Direct Cremation Podcast with your hosts, Tyler Yamasaki and Will DeMichaelis. White Rose Aqua Cremation is the first alkaline hydrolysis facility for human final disposition in California. As of right now, they're the only on-site aqua cremation facility in California that serves the public. Our guest today is the founder of White Rose Aqua Cremation and was instrumental in developing California's first alkaline hydrolysis facility. He is a technical school graduate of the U.S. Navy, a multi-certified medical equipment industry technician, and a crematory manager. He is pioneering the gentle water cremation movement. Please welcome our guest, David Perfito.
Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm really interested in this one. Being the first of something is always fun. So I want to start off and go a little bit on the personal side first. Who are you and how did you end up as the founder of California's first alkaline hydrolysis facility?
Well, I appreciate that. I had been thinking about this industry since 2010. I had the opportunity in working for a funeral director that owned a crematory. And in my other business, we did a lot of technology and data networking and camera systems, things of that nature. And maybe as you know, I know Will knows that, crematories are supposed to have cameras on their stacks to watch their smoke emissions and different things of that. And as we all moved into technology, we have to keep upgrading our networks. It seems like we don't have to do that much anymore, but through the last 20 years, you had to go from different wiring to get a faster speed. So anyway, that's how I got my first glimpse into the funeral industry, was in a flame crematory. I looked at it and it was very different from my business. And I thought someday I'd like to operate a business plan like that.
Okay, cool. Could you please give us the mildly technical definition of alkaline hydrolysis, or maybe the one you would give technically to a family?
Sure.
Like, what is alkaline hydrolysis?
Right. It's the hydrolysis of the tissue that's performed with a higher pH water. So we call it alkaline water because it's a base. It's not an acid. So we're taking we're using potassium salts, whether it's sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. And what that does is it raises the pH, or the alkalinity of the water. The water at that point becomes, very good at breaking the bonds of the tissue. So the proteins and the salts and the sugars, peptides, it breaks them all apart and suspends them.
That's a good working definition for the audience. I have a question about the process for water cremation. I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of flame cremations. So I know what what a body looks like when you check to reposition a normal flame cremation. So those stages of the human decomposition under flame cremation are familiar to me. Can you describe or break down in phases what happens to the body and its decomposition during a water cremation?
Sure. Yeah, I'll attempt to do that. So in our machine, there's a few different manufacturers that make this alkaline hydrolysis machine. In our machine, I believe ours to be the most gentle. And what happens there is that it will fill up with 95% of water and 5% of potassium salts. The potassium salt will raise the alkalinity of the water. A lot of people think that the potassium salt is what breaks down the body or imitates the rapid decomposition, but it's the water. Water is a very gentle and it can also, running over rocks, it'll smooth rocks. So water is very powerful depending on how you use it. But in our case, in our machine, so by raising the alkalinity of the water, that's what's breaking down the tissue, there's a small stir, if you will, like a mixer inside of our machine, which is separate from where the body is, where the deceased lies. Deceased lies in like a basket, if you will, that's in the chamber. And this little stir, this little mixer, we can set the revolutions. So for 60 revolutions a minute, it's just gently stirring, gently moving the water around the body, and that's what breaks down the tissue. That's what breaks down the body. And it break sounds like a kind of an aggressive word, but it's an 8-hour process of just stirring water, if you will. It's kind of like a gentle water flow around the body.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's one of the questions that we had for you later. How long does it take? So 8 hours is about average?
8 hours is about average, yep. And then, of course, we would open the machine, and then there's a few more hours of processing that goes on. There's about an hour, depending upon the case, an hour before you go in. It's very different since you're used to the retort. Very different, where in our machine is so gentle that it can't break anything down. In a retort, you could put anything in it. We just have to have the body and it's something water soluble, like either silk or a PVA type of material, something that is water soluble. So anything that's not water soluble will not break down. To give you an idea of how gentle, we had a family that wanted to put a bouquet of flowers in there, of roses, just some roses with the decedent in the basket in the machine. And 8 hours later, when we took the case out to receive the bone, the skeletal bone, the flowers were the stems, the flowers, they weren't red anymore. They were like a brown, but they were stuck all over the inside of the basket. They didn't break down. So that's how gentle, where this water is not, it's not a chemical, it's the water that's breaking it down. And high alkaline water will not break down rose petals or flower petals or anything like that, or the stems. It will only break down what is water soluble. And you and me, all of us are water soluble. We're made mostly of water. So it just keeps getting a little bit, deeper when you talk about the gentleness of it, and to get away from the chemical part that the potassium hydroxide has a chemical name, or is a chemical name, and has a chemical element of the 3 letters, but it's only used to raise the alkalinity of the water.
So is there like a cremation container or anything then? I mean, I know it's a lot different. So do you still have to put the body in something before you put it into the machine?
You absolutely don't have to. What we will do is, so the body has to be prepared. So there can't be any bandages or stitches or any cotton. Machine can't process cotton. It can process silk. So the body can be in like a silk gown or in a silk pouch or in a, they call it PVA, polyvinyl, I believe it's alcohol, a derivative of that where it breaks down in water. But if we're doing a witness in our facility, we'll just have a sheet over the person. And once we close the door, we'll open a little bit and pull the sheet out just to be presentable.
That's nice. That's a nice way to do it for families. Mm-hmm. That's really nice, David.
So what does the aqua cremation remains look like compared to the traditional remains that we're all used to, the darker, more coarse, grainy, sand-like stuff? I've
been in a few, probably at least a handful of flame crematories over the years, and the flame cremation remains are there's some charring. There's a lot more is broken down by the aggressiveness of the element fire, if you will. So those remains are going to be a little bit darker. And again, it all depends on the makeup of the person. Some bones are a little bit darker than others. In our machine, they're much lighter, if not a bright white. But we can't consistently always get it a bright white because of the inconsistency of our bodies from individual to individual. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did you get certified to be the first? I mean, you have license HF1, which is really amazing. What was that journey like, getting to be a fully operational facility that doesn't have to transport bodies across state lines to get aqua cremation done?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was quite frustrating. I can tell you that because of I really, maybe I'm a little bit naive, but when the state says in 2017, okay, we approve it, and you'll be able to go 3 years from now because we have to get our legalities correct and change our laws as far as the funeral industry goes. What is a crematory operator? What is a hydrolysis facility operator? We'll get all that done the next 3 years, and in July of 2020, we'll be ready to go. So I believe that. And I guess that's a good thing because it had been really probably 6
Get
months.
you moving.
6 months of moving and shaking and lack of rest.
There you go.
Ready. We didn't necessarily, it wasn't a competition thing to be the first. And it was just, I want to do this and let's keep moving forward, make it happen. We've done other businesses before. We have the know-how and the drive to make it happen. I learned a lot along the way because, again, I wasn't in the industry. I had really no idea. There were a lot of different agencies that had what fell out to me. They kind of had their hand out. I understand there's a very heavily regulated industry, but I also felt like everybody wanted to get paid for a permit of some kind. And then once they got paid, they wanted to come in and see if, I guess that's backwards. They want to get paid after they came in and saw what we had and said, oh, okay, you're going to pay us this much. There was a lot of negotiation that the engineers at the factory who made our machine had to go through at the State Department of Public Health and also at our local municipality wastewater district. There was a lot of chemical engineering negotiations to go on. They wanted a lot of test results, things of that nature, along with the other agencies in our state. Just even the Cemetery and Funeral Bureau, they were kind of at the mercy of their own departments, is what it seemed like. I was more at the mercy of everyone going, "What is this?" and what does it do? That type of question. So I still sit here sometimes and go, HF1, yeah, I think I would get lucky, but people correct me all the time. They say, well, you just, I guess, don't know how to take no for an answer. I don't know, but I'm very, very delighted with it.
It's a good way to be.
Yeah, I'm very delighted with it. And it doesn't become a personal thing to go, oh, look what I accomplished. It definitely does not do that. I am very much encouraged by the families that we serve because it's amazing. It's amazing the feedback and the encouragement I get. And I totally forgot about everything I've been through. It makes it much, much more worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. What do families find valuable in aqua cremation or like a gentle water cremation? Because I ask this because, the pricing is obviously a lot different from, a very affordable flame cremation to what you guys offer. So there has to be, that gap has to be filled with value. So what do families find valuable?
Sure. So one thing I want to say before I answer that question, and you might have to remind me what the question is, that a lot of people want to compare, when they hear cremation, they want to compare it to what was already out there. So they want to compare it to flame, especially when it comes to price. And I think as consumers, we all do that with many different things. But I'm not always telling people this, but I definitely feel this. There's no comparison. So you can't compare the two prices as a consumer. And I think that's happening because of lack of education and of the same word cremation. Now, we use it in our business name, so I get it, but we only used it so the public knows who we are, what we're doing. So it's kind of a double-edged sword like that. But yeah. What was the original question you said? You asked me about price or?
Yeah. So what have you learned in your time serving families that have chosen aqua cremation over other alternatives to disposition? Why did they choose you? What did they find valuable? What was the feedback?
Right. We have some families that have hung up on us or, through the, well, how much is this? That's because they're not really looking for it. They're looking for just a funeral home that did cremation. And when you tell them it's just under $4,000, they're like, oh my gosh, that's too much. I got to go buy. But when we're searched out by the families that want the water cremation, know a little bit more about it. And I believe there is a perceived value, if you will, of when we introduce those words of non-aggressive, gentle, and eco-friendly. They're like, that's what I want. There's no, well, I can get it cheaper. We don't find ourselves negotiating at all. And once you offer that, you're halfway into the family's heart. So our staff, they've been called rock stars. It's very, very encouraging, and families are very well pleased and very happy when they leave. So I believe water cremation, the idea of it, the perceived value of it, does half the battle. If in consumerism or trying to do a job well done. And then, of course, the other half is the service that follows with it. And I don't mean service by a funeral service. I mean just a service that they get by our conversations with them, by the ease of the paperwork from Party Pro, by just the whole experience. So it's fantastic. And I really feel like I kind of stepped into it. Really, it's definitely it didn't all happen up here. I'll tell you that. So we're very lucky.
It never does. It never does in this industry, David.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you get the feedback like that from families, you realize what the real impact of your idea was, and it kind of takes on a life of its own. It's great to hear. I'm really glad to hear that.
Well, and I think that it tends to be a lot more creative. So when you are, or when I am really thinking about how to serve well without the performance of it, if you will, for some kind of thing for myself. Mm-hmm. But to really put myself in their shoes, and I've experienced some of it already, and to help them along the way, they're so delighted. And again, that's what keeps your mind, I believe, creative, because you're not trying to focus on anything else but serving them well. What because everyone's different. What do you need? Right. How can we help you? So you have the foundation of it. Mm-hmm. I think families lead you to tell you what they want, and you just give them what they want. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yes. And that's how you find your audience. Mm-hmm. You kind of answered it a little bit, but I kind of maybe want to delve, if you want to answer it a different way. Who are your clientele right now? What are some of the common characteristics you see for families choosing a Gentra water cremation? What are some of the overlapping characteristics?
Yeah, I think that would be probably we're promoted by hospice, or by the perceived value, that conversation of bringing gentle into it. Also, it's accompanied with, we have a history, so our staff has a history as well. And I just think that's what's really been leading the way. I can't really surmise who our clientele are, because it's definitely, it's really changed from the beginning. So I kind of don't even focus on it anymore. I thought it was going to be these, and we would target market these people and this demographic, and we'd stay here and really, like work it with a guy on the corner with a sign type of a deal in a busy corner.
Right.
But it's really been varied. And what's been very pleasant is just to kind of let go of trying to measure that, if you will, because many more creative ideas come into place. I shared one with Tyler last week about our advertising campaign in the Beverly Hills area. Do you remember that, Tyler? And everyone
I do.
Yeah, and I didn't want to disclose it out in the space, but everyone I told about that, they're like, well, that's a great idea. And I'm like, all we're trying to do is really stimulate the public with the intent to look at what alkaline hydrolysis, or what water cremation is. So we're not even trying to advertise our brand. We're just trying to educate the public. I don't even know if that's measurable, because I see everyone that hears about it, as soon as you tell them, they go, that's what I want. So I don't think it's a demographic. I don't even think it's really measurable. But I can tell you, it's not the people that just want to dispose of a body for $900.
Yes.
Yes. I get that. I've been in that boat twice. So
I'm sorry to hear that. But I think going through it yourself kind of gives you the best perspective on how to operate a business in the space. And that's how I felt myself. Tyler and I talk at length about funeral homes these days. The best approach is to just be who you are and be honest and authentic about that, and your audience will respond to that. And I think you are a testament to that thesis and playing that out in your way specifically. And it's really awesome to hear people respond to it, which is great. We always found in our business, we operated like flame cremation through Southern California. Mm-hmm. And we found that education was the best way to grow our business, educating hospice workers, hospital workers, social workers, nurses, and any type of director role too, just to offer information about the products and services we offer, not even as a business, but just that our industry offers, and what type of questions as professionals they should be thinking about as advocates for their families. And that paid dividends more than we could ever have imagined, because it grew that trusting relationship between the different phases of who cares for families.
Yeah.
End of life care with hospice and skilled nursing facilities and hospitals, and then death care with burial and cremation services and mortuary services. So that long term was such a successful avenue.
You bring up a really good point. It made me think about that, Will, is that with hospice, it's so important to them to do their, well, most of them, I think I've heard some other stories, but the majority from what I've heard is that they really, really care about their client, about someone who is on hospice. And so whether it would be burial, whether it be flame cremation or water cremation, if they felt whoever the facility was that was going to care for this person when they passed away, it didn't matter if it was a funeral home that only did burial, only did flame, or only did water. They would recommend because they know them, they know the staff. And I guess if I'm thinking about that now, it doesn't matter what form of disposition you'd like to have, because there's no wrong form, there's no right form, no wrong form.
Right.
But more importantly, they want to see it through that whoever comes and picks up the person that they've been taking care of and they have honored and the family knows, they really want whomever that home is, that funeral home or that provider, they want the same treatment. So I would say that, we've done a lot of lectures to different groups and different hospice, things like that. They get to know us. That's probably the biggest benefit, or not benefit, but that's what they care about. So again, it could be any form of disposition.
It
but
is.
If they know that this person is going to be picked up and cared for by this particular funeral home who have a magnificent staff and a great reputation, and they really feel comfortable, they're going to recommend that. Again, it could be any form of disposition, really. So I think, yeah.
You're absolutely right. We did a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think just the three things going on here with the different forms of disposition. So it's all what they feel comfortable with or what the family wants. And depends on the education. So it's like layers. It's very layered.
It is very layered, and establishing, we always took the approach with hospice specifically, whether a family chooses our mortuary or not, cremation, burial, body donation, gentle water cremation or not, or whatever, that's not much of our concern. Our concern is that you, as an advocate for this family, have a resource in us to get questions answered that you don't know so that you can help that family. And that is kind of the ultimate help that they could receive. And it's the ultimate way to build that relationship with them, to show that you care as much about that family as they do, which you need to care about getting them the information they need rather than caring about getting the case.
Sure. Yeah. And I like meeting other funeral home owners or workers that are as excited, maybe the wrong word, about helping families. And again, whatever form of disposition it is, because it's that end of life for the person, they really don't know, but the family is the one that really goes through it. And to be able to help them with any of those things would be, I guess that's the focus. It's not a focus on revenue. It's not a focus on cases. I would definitely say that our focus is in that space of making sure that the family is okay, because we understand that journey and what they have to go through and how can we help you do all that. And it's almost like, it really is for me with the two different hats, almost like two different businesses going on, right? Because as an owner, I have to wear the business hat, make sure the revenue, have all these different things, and we maintain the creativity in order to not get stagnant in things. But the other part is always, it's very, very stimulating as well. What more can we do? How can we serve these people even better? And I'm delighted because I'm always going, and to have now two things to juggle in the air, that's great. I like it.
Yeah. Focus on customer experience. You're doing the right stuff. Everything else just
talked about a lot. And I think here it comes more naturally. We don't have to get together and talk about, okay, we need to do this. I mean, sometimes we do, but when you have that, when that's your space anyway, it's like, it's just kind of a natural thing. You don't even know what's going on really. And people will encourage you with compliments. You're like, oh, okay, that's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting David, I want to touch a little bit upon, you keep talking about gentle, and I think we haven't even really touched on like the eco-friendly side of things. And like, I know when we talked a while back, I was really under the impression that the water cremation, like what people would find super valuable in it was the, the eco-friendly side of it. And it sounds like what you're saying is that actually isn't the main point that catches people's attention or families' attention. They actually, I'm sure that's part of a consideration, and that will serve some, but the more of it is more about the gentleness and the way things are done.
Yeah, we feel it's kind of an age group thing. So we've been able to offer preneed almost 1-to-1 with at need, which is unheard of in our industry. And that's being driven by what you just said, Tyler, about the eco-friendliness of it. Again, when you're, 30, 40 years old, you're like, yeah, okay, gentle, who cares? Just get rid of my body. That's what most people say. But if they know that if they're being a little more responsible, they have a family or they just want to get things ready, they go, what's the best choice here? And I have another 20 years to afford it. Yeah, I can do it for $1,000 or I can do it for $400. But I really care about the environment, really care about what's happening to the world today. And I want to make a little small contribution. So I want to do this green space, eco-friendly, whether it's natural burial or whether it's this. And that really is more appealing to younger people, if you will. People that are more up and, are nearing end of life. They're like, well, yeah, it's really all about me. It's not about the environment right now. So I want something that's going to be, it's going to be gentle. I want some, or both, maybe they're choosing both, but I really think that when you're facing end of life or you're on hospice, you're like, let's just keep promoting this gentleness, this caring. We're going to continue to take care of you well. It's like a duality going on, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. And so I want to preface this question that I'm going to ask you. I think what Will and I have learned on talking to many different perspectives in death care, that there's a place for the low cost side of things, right? And I'm not advocating for this race to the bottom mentality, but there is a huge price difference between disposition options, right? I could get a direct cremation in some cities for $600, right? You said yours is right now priced at $4,000, and I understand that you're the first, and there's not a lot that you can do, and there's not a lot of options out there, and like there's a lot that took for you guys to get here. So I would imagine as this scales up and there's more people doing it, that there will be a balance of price adjustments a little bit. What do you think is going to be needed in your process to get cheaper? Is it the equipment? Is it stuff like that would actually allow for it to be a little bit more accessible to maybe, the wider population who maybe would want this option for the gentleness or for the eco-friendly option, but maybe can't afford it at this moment?
Sure. Great question. But I don't think that we serve a small demographic. I think it's pretty wide. I think the select few become almost like when we're talking about consumers. I think that as consumers, there's some people that live more on a impoverished level, if you will. When we think about income, or we think, in America, we say, oh, this class, that class, this class. I think when it becomes an affordability issue, they're not even thinking about gentle, about these things. We just got to make it happen. So I think it's pretty wide. So our clientele or our demographic is pretty wide. Some people might not want it because it costs more money. They're just trying to make the disposition and make it quick, and let's just get it over with. They don't really, it doesn't really matter to them. So I don't feel a sense of competition that way. Now, I can tell you this, that when we came to market with our average retail, we did compare it to what was happening in Nevada. There's only one machine in Nevada. Their price was $1,000 less than our price, which our business model was coming into the market with their price. And when we found out their price, we said, well, that's Nevada, and we're gonna bump it up a little bit here. I'm glad we did, because there's been a lot more involved as far as charges go to operate, so to cover those costs. I'm going to back up a little bit. We have two other people in California, in Southern California, that are offering alkaline hydrolysis, if you will. And their prices were significantly lower. They were taking the decedent in, and they were putting them on an airplane to another state, 2 states over, and they were getting the disposition done there for a trade price that was very, very low, almost similar to flame cremation. And so they could offer much lower prices. Since then, in the last year and a half, they've brought their pricing right up to retail where we are. And one of those funeral homes use us in a trade, and the other one would like to use us in a trade cremation, but it's just not feasible for them as far as costs go, because they're basically just a storefront. They don't even have a funeral home, if you will. They just have a funeral home establishment license.
Right.
So I don't see, and to think ahead, I don't think that prices will come down at all. I don't think I don't think it compares with flame. And of course, without any other retail storefronts or funeral homes that have these machines in California, it allows us to operate it at whatever we want, really. Not that we're doing that, but we've set a price to where it obviously covers overhead, and it covers a lot of the other permitting and regulation fees that come along with it in this state. So another state like Nevada, they don't have that. Another state like Washington or Oregon, they don't have those things like California has. California is pretty well regulated, and they take everybody's money in every industry you're in. So that's why a lot
every
of
chance they can
move out of California.
every chance they can.
It's expensive to operate here. So I think we're right at where we ought to be. And if anything, I think about the next 3 years, we're going to stay consistent, even through everything that's happened with inflation or, we've just stayed consistent. We've actually added more to our package, which is kind of funny. My business partner's always like, well, isn't that too much? I'm like, no, we're really helping families. There's some space in there to operate. We came, like I said, at $28.95. That's what we were going to, and so there's enough room in there to operate and serve people well and be very inclusive to where they go, wow, I get all that, and they like that. Again, very different from direct water cremation, because we're offering so much more in our direct package.
Yeah, you are. I'll give you a lot of credit for a 90-mile radius for transport.
Sure.
It's really impressive.
People really, all the way up to the edge of LA County, at the end of Orange County, and it goes all the way up to, I believe we reach all the way to Ontario and Riverside County. And people are delighted about that. It's 180 miles. That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It also simplifies numbers in their head too, as a consumer, because I'm giving pricing to families over the phone for flame cremation is very location based, because those radii are a lot smaller. So it kind of can confuse people, or just add extra steps, but you just kind of figured it out on the front end and just give value on the front end, which I think is cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, you got it. It's not your normal 25 or 30 miles, and that coupled with the care and from the first phone call that they're getting. Yeah, I think it's a great offer. Like I said, we're not trying to compete with anybody. We have a small business plan, if you will. We just want to serve people well, and I've been approached at least 3 or 4 times with big investment. People want to grow it. And they want to, since I have all the know-how, they want to start more facilities in California. We want to partner. We want to get the whole market. We want to do this. We want to do that. I'm like, that's not what I'm interested in. So we're very comfortable here, and just to do our job well. That's about it. Nice. Stay authentic, David. That's gold. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you. It's about the processing of the remains after the water cremation. I'm very familiar with a normal flame cremation processor. Do you use a similar type or something specific to water cremation? The exact same processor. We have a higher end processor that has a little more benefit to the user. And it's much cleaner, if you will. I don't know what processors you've used in the past, but some of them are kind of prehistoric. This one's a little bit fancier, but it is the same type of pulverization a cremulator, which is called, does. So when we pull our basket out of our machine after 8 hours, we have a full skeletal. There's no broken or charred. It's pretty much all of the bone. And those bones are damp. They're also very brittle. So brittle and damp don't seem to go together, but they maintain. You can actually
squeeze and break the bone. What we do is we gather all the skeletal bone up, and we put them on a drying sheet, and then they go in a convection dryer at a very, very low temperature to pull the moisture out. Now, the same thing could happen if we just left the bone, the remains, out in just the environment, not in the environment outside, but in the funeral home.
Sure.
And they would dry. They would be about 3 days. They would be dry. So we just pull the moisture out gently, and then we process, because if the bones are damp and you try to run through a cremulator, it would just make you wouldn't get the result that you wanted.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Do the bones come out warm at all after the water cremation, or are they just room temperature?
They do, and depending on our machine, there's a lot of different programming you can do to rinse. We do have a very a warm water rinse afterwards, and then we have a cool rinse afterwards. The machine, we open the door at about 100, and it's about 140 degrees in there when we open.
Oh wow!
So the bones are warm and they're damp. You easily pick them up. So the bones aren't that, but the machine is a very large stainless steel cylinder, very thick. It's made by a pipeline company that makes it for the manufacturer that makes the machine. So all that to say is that it holds heat a lot. The bones aren't hot, but the machine, at 140, that's the outside of the machine. But no, they're just damp and they're fine to the touch. Again, we take them and put them on drying trays and then put them in a convection dryer, about maybe 200 degrees, so very, very minimal, for just a couple 3 hours, and just gently pulls the warm air gently pulls the moisture out. Awesome. Then we process.
What happens to all the organic water or the organic breakdown remains after it's done? What do you guys do with it? We
call it effluent. So everything that's suspended in the effluent, or in the alkaline water, if you will, the peptides, the proteins, the sugars, the salts, everything that your body is obviously already 65% water. So the tissue, there's a lot of water in that. So all that stays suspended in the effluent. About 20 minutes into the 4-hour cycle, everything is sterile. So no RNA, no DNA, nothing that can hurt you. And then after the cycles, it cools down. We release that for treatment. So that goes to the treatment facility. They will treat and reclaim some for non-potable water. A lot of utility uses that for different things. And then the rest of the treated water will go. Our facility here, it goes about 5 miles off the coast of Cardiff, out that way, Del Mar, Cardiff, and is released into the ocean. So not every city or county or municipality does it the same way. In this area over here, there's 3 cities or municipalities that use the same idea of what I just mentioned. Some counties and some municipalities, local municipalities, along with the governmental county, will not let you do that. So we've realized that in Los Angeles County and Orange County and in parts of southern Riverside County, you can't place one of these machines. Sometimes you can do it for pets. But for humans, they don't want to discuss that. There's a little stigma to it. But again, it's much cleaner than going to the bathroom, and it's just kind of wrapping your head around that part. And again, it's just organic matter, just like anything else that comes from a human, whether the human's alive or not alive. Sometimes I hear operators, when they talk about that, they go, "Well, you should see what a funeral home releases into the municipality," which I don't go there. I don't bash anybody. I just try to explain it, and if the person's okay with that, then they're okay with that. And if they're not, then it's America. That's what everyone has an opinion.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
This is kind of our staple question of our podcast. We've gotten a lot of differing opinions from answering this question, and we'd like your input too. What does death care look like in 10 years, in your opinion?
In my opinion, in my business, or just in my opinion, industry-wise?
However you want to answer it.
It doesn't have to be business specific, but I'm sure, you got into this business because you saw a reason to in the future. So I imagine it's kind of...
Yeah, along the way, I've asked myself why, because it's been so challenging and so and so different as I reach into my retirement years, I guess one would say. I sometimes I don't anymore because I'm so rewarded by the encouragement and the feedback that we get by helping people. Prior to that, with the state dragging and dragging and dragging, I have sat there for quite some time going, hey, I don't know why I've done this. Why did I enter this? But I see why now. I see why now, and the staff sees why, and it's just a really, really good place to be. I don't even know how to really articulate it. It's really good. As far as 10 years from now, I see still all three industries of burial and flame and water still being a viable option because everyone wants something different. Whether it's usually just driven obviously by belief system, what people want. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. I would think that green burial, which I call it, green or traditional, I think traditional burial is the way they used to bury people back 100 years ago. They used to just bury them. They don't need all this fancy stuff. You get a box and you just put them in the ground and there you go. So I think in 10 years, I think that you're going to see a lot more of that being more popular. We have in California now, we have natural organic reduction that just got passed and will be going into effect in a number of years, which is also very interesting. And I think water cremation it might even become like flame cremation in 5 years. Someone else might come up with a new idea or technology and says, we just make you disappear. It's like, wow, it's the most gentle, eco-friendly thing you could possibly get. It's like, how do you do that? Well, it's an industry secret, but you just disappear. And so
disappear.
I really think just like, alkaline hydrolysis came along and people are like, wow, that's what I think. I think it's going to be a run and it can go for the next 50 years. But I also think that as we creative humans are, that we're going to bring to the consumer market something different and something more appealing or shiny or, away from the norm that people are going to be like, that's what I want to do. Because I think that's what's pretty much happening. That's the American consumer market, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and you're evidence of it. So.
And I can say this, which Tyler, I can say this, that I was reading, I was going through some email. There was a director named Steven. It was something you sent recently about a funeral director. His name is Steven, talking about your Parting Pro software. And he had a crematory, and they did only Parting Pro software with this specific crematory. And they had a great success at it. So it gave me this great idea. I've already been working on that Beverly Hills thing, as I think I mentioned to you last week. And, And so just by listening to that and just by the easeability and the forward thinking of what you've brought to market with your software, it was like this great idea. So I applaud you with that. I know that a lot have been applauding you with that. But just like you say, for the consumer, that's why I bring it in, because we're talking about 10 years from now. That's what the consumer wants. They want to just do it how they want to do it. They don't want to be told or regulated or, and really it makes people feel better. They feel, they're not as fearful anymore because they feel like they're in control. And that's what I think technology does, makes you feel like you're in control, even though you're not, but, gives you that.
A little bit. Yeah. Cool. So, was there anything else you wanted to talk about today, or anything you felt like we missed?
No, I think that was all of it. I definitely wanted to promote the gentleness. I gave you the example of the flowers.
Yep.
I brought into the gentleness for the family, the physical family as well, besides the decedent. I just think it's a great service, water cremation. I'm proud of it. Not proud of what I've done, but I'm proud of what it offers to families. And that perceived value, if you will, is so very important, because that's all you have is this perception, both on your grief journey, on your journey of planning for your family, final disposition. It's pretty varied and heavy, and it doesn't have to be so weighty, if you will. The process of it. The process of taking care of someone in a final disposition. Grief is grief, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks a lot, David. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So David, I want to give you this opportunity to kind of promote, your website. How can people contact you? I know your website is whiteroseaquacremation.com. But if you wanted to drop maybe some other socials or just your email, so if people do have questions about the process or anything, maybe they can reach out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, they can always email us at info@whiteroseaquacremation.com. whiteroseaqua.com. They can always call us directly at 442-777-6077, which seems kind of antiquated, but for people my age group, that's what they like to do too. They don't always like to look on the internet. But even just a search on water cremation, gentle water cremation, there's a lot of good information out there. There are some other providers in California that are promoting, but not necessarily operating here. So I think that makes a difference to the families as well, to know that, again, I mentioned the intimacy, or you did, Will, and the uniqueness of that in our industry. So they tend to like that a little bit more. We do promote or talk about that. We don't promote that. We just talk about that. And we talk about it very transparently and very sincerely, because it's very rare. So yeah, just White Rose, look up White Rose Aqua Cremation and ask your social worker, your hospice worker about it. A lot of people don't know much about the water cremation, but as soon as they hear about it, they really like it. Very far and few between that people bash it.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I've learned quite a bit, and I do think that this is going to be something that is going to be much more commonplace in the coming years. So maybe we can check in again in a year with you, and we can have a completely new discussion about what families like and what you've been seeing.
Part two.
I appreciate that. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, David. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you ever want to know more, please find us at directcremation.com.